Welcome everyone to my channel. Today, I'm going to share with you a real-life story from history about how my sister found her path and chose a lesbian partner. It's an honest, heartfelt journey, and I hope you'll listen with an open mind.
The color of a secret sky, the gray house. The gray of the house matched the gray of the sky on the day we buried my father. I was 13, and the world had lost all its pigment. The scent of disinfectant and casserole dishes from well-meaning neighbors clung to the air, a cloying perfume of loss. My mother moved through the rooms like a ghost, her eyes hollowed out by a grief so profound it seemed to swallow the light. His absence was a physical thing, a cold space in the hallway, a silence at the dinner table that was louder than any noise. I'd catch myself listening for the jingle of his keys in the door, for his low, rumbling laugh. But there was only the quiet and my mother's silent tears. The gray persisted for a year. Then, with a suddenness that felt like a betrayal, color began to seep back in. It came in the form of Robert. He was a friend of a friend, a man with a kind, if somewhat weary, smile and a daughter my age. His wife had passed from illness years before. He understood loss, my mother said. He understood us. Their courtship was a quiet, practical thing. It wasn't a whirlwind of passion, but a merging of two broken halves, a mutual agreement to stop being so lonely. They married in a simple civil ceremony. The gray house was sold, and we moved into Robert's comfortable, sun-filled home in a neighboring suburb. It was a nicer house by any objective measure, but it wasn't mine. And then there was Alara. Alara was Robert's daughter. She was 13 like me, with a cascade of dark hair that seemed to hold secrets and eyes the color of a stormy sea. She was quiet, observant, a collector of moments and emotions. We were thrust together by circumstance, two only children suddenly told they were sisters. We shared a bathroom, a dinner table, a life. We did not share a language of grief. Mine was silent and internalized. Hers was expressed in a fierce, protective loyalty to her father and a deep, artistic melancholy. We circled each other warily those first few months, two planets trapped in the same new orbit. We were polite, careful, a you can go first and thank you kind of relationship. Our parents watched us with hopeful, anxious eyes, willing a friendship to spark. But the spark, when it came, was of a completely different nature, and it ignited a fire they never could have anticipated. Part 2. The glow in the dark. The truce turned into a tentative alliance during a rainy Saturday. Boredom was our first common enemy. We were sprawled on the living room floor, scrolling through endless streaming options, dismissing everything as too juvenile, too boring, too stupid. "What about that one?" Alara asked, her voice quiet. She pointed to a thumbnail image on the screen. It showed two women standing close, their foreheads almost touching, a look of intense emotion passing between them. The title was in French. It was rated for mature audiences. My heart did a funny little stutter. I'd never seen a movie like that suggested so openly.
I glanced at her. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a faint blush on her cheeks. "Our parents would never let us," I whispered, as if they could hear us from the garden. "They're at the store," she said, her stormy eyes meeting mine. A challenge, a conspiracy. We didn't say another word. She clicked play. We didn't move to the couch. We stayed on the floor leaning against it, the laptop a glowing rectangle of forbidden light between us. The movie wasn't crude or explicit. It was achingly beautiful. A slow, painful, gorgeous burn of a story about two women in another time, another place, falling in love against all odds. We watched, utterly absorbed. The room grew dark around us, the only illumination the flickering screen and the occasional flash of lightning outside. We were breathing in sync. I was hyper-aware of her presence, the sound of her breathing, the scent of her shampoo, vanilla and something like rain. A particularly intimate scene began to unfold on screen. It wasn't about sex, it was about tenderness. A hand brushing a strand of hair from a face. A look of such raw vulnerability it made my chest ache. My own hand was resting on the carpet. And then it happened. Alara's pinky finger, tentative and shy, brushed against mine. The contact was electric. A jolt shot straight up my arm and exploded in my chest, warm and terrifying and wonderful. I froze. On screen, the two women kissed, and it was the most natural, most heartbreaking thing I had ever seen. I didn't pull my hand away. I turned my palm up, a silent question, a surrender. Her fingers slowly, carefully laced through mine. Her skin was soft, her grip firm. We sat there for the rest of the movie, holding hands in the dark, watching a love story that suddenly felt less like a foreign film and more like a mirror. When the credits rolled, the spell was broken. We let go simultaneously, as if scalded. The room was painfully quiet, save for the soft patter of rain. We didn't look at each other. "I should go do my homework," Alara mumbled, snapping the laptop shut and plunging the room into near darkness. "Yeah, me too," I said, my voice strangely hoarse. We fled to our separate rooms. I closed my door and leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could still feel the ghost of her fingers intertwined with mine. What was that feeling? It was confusion, fear, a dizzying thrill, and a sense of coming home all at once. It was the first feeling that was entirely my own, and entirely about her, since my world had turned gray. It was the most alive I had felt in over a year. That simple, silent touch was our beginning. It was the first stitch in the invisible thread that would forever bind my soul to Alara's. We had found our common language, and it was spoken not with words, but with skin and glances, and the brave, terrifying silence of a shared secret, the grammar of us. The days after the movie were a new kind of tense. The careful politeness was gone, replaced by a charged, humming awareness. Every glance held a question. Every accidental brush of shoulders in the hallway was a lightning strike. We were two seismographs, sensitive only to each other's tremors. We didn't speak of it. Words felt too dangerous, too concrete. They would make the thing that had happened in the dark real in the harsh light of day, in a house owned by our parents. Instead, we developed a new language. It was in the way I'd make 2 cups of tea instead of 1, leaving hers on the counter with a specific spoon, the one with the chipped handle, sticking out. It was in the way she'd saved the last chapter of a library book for me, marking it with a specific wildflower pressed between the pages. It was in the notes we left for each other in the margins of our shared school textbooks, comments about history lessons that were secretly about us, about the secret history we were writing. Our parents saw the increased closeness and beamed. "I'm so glad you two are finally becoming real sisters," my mother said one evening, ruffling my hair. The word sisters landed like a stone in my stomach. I forced a smile, catching Alara's eye across the room. Her expression was unreadable, but a faint flush crept up her neck. Our secret meetings became our lifeline. We'd claimed to be studying at the library, but instead would bike to the sprawling city park, finding a hidden clearing by the creek. There, surrounded by the rustling leaves and the gentle murmur of water, we could be us. The first time we kissed was there. The air was cool, and dappled sunlight played on her face. We were talking about nothing, everything, our hands almost touching. The conversation faded. The world narrowed to the space between us. I saw the same nervous wonder in her eyes that was thrumming through my own veins. There was no movie to guide us, no script to follow. It was just us, 2 girls tethered by a shared, terrifying, beautiful truth. I leaned in. She met me halfway. It was nothing like the movies. It was clumsy, our noses bumped, and we pulled away, breathless and giggling nervously. But then we tried again, slower, softer. And that one was perfect. It tasted of mint gum and innocence, and a future I hadn't dared to imagine. It was a key turning in a lock deep inside me, opening a door to a world painted in colors I never knew existed. The cracks in the foundation high school became a double life. We were honor students, dutiful daughters, and seemingly the closest of sisters. We perfected the art of the public performance, shopping for clothes together, complaining about homework, rolling our eyes at our parents in unison. It was a shield, and behind it our love grew fiercer, more profound. But secrets are heavy, and the weight of ours began to strain the foundations of our performance. It was the little things. The way Robert would sometimes pause, looking at us with a slight, unreadable frown when he thought we weren't looking. The way my mother once walked into Alara's room without knocking and found us sitting a little too close on the bed, a map spread out between us, our heads bent together. We'd been planning a dream trip to some far-flung beach, a place where we could hold hands in the open. "Planning your great escape?" my mother had asked, her tone light but her eyes curiously intent. "Just a geography project," Alara said smoothly, her voice a calm lake betraying no ripples of the panic I felt crashing inside me. The close call left us shaken. The house, once a haven of sunlit rooms, began to feel like a gilded cage. The walls felt thin, our whispers too loud. The fear of discovery became a constant low-grade hum in the background of our lives, a counterpoint to the joy we found in each other. The biggest fight we ever had was born from this pressure. It was senior year, and the pressure of college applications was upon us. The unspoken question hung between us: what happens next? "I've been looking at UCLA," I said tentatively one night in my room, showing her the brochure. "They have a great art history program. For you. And it's California. Far away. A place to start fresh." Alara's face closed off. "I can't ask my dad to pay for out-of-state tuition. It's too expensive. My application is going to state. It's a solid school. State is here, I argued, my voice rising with desperation. We'll still be living at home. We'll still be hiding. What choice do we have, Maya? She shot back, her voice a sharp whisper. You think my father, your mother are ready for this? You think this town is? We have to be practical. Practical? The word tasted like ash. Is that what we're calling it? Hiding who we are forever? I can't do that, Alara. I won't. We said things we didn't mean, fueled by fear and the terrifying prospect of being torn apart. We were two animals caught in a trap, snapping at each other instead of working to get free. We didn't speak for 2 days. A cold war in the sunny house that made our parents exchange worried, confused glances. It was Alara who broke the silence. She came into my room, her eyes red-rimmed, and handed me a crumpled piece of paper. It was a printout for a scholarship for LGBTQ+ students in the arts. I'm scared too, she whispered. But we'll find a way. Together. I applied for this. And I'll apply for a dozen more. We'll get to California. We held each other that night. Not with the passion of before, but with the desperate, fierce cling of two survivors to a single life raft. We had chosen us. Now we just had to build a world strong enough to hold us. The world splits open. Discovery, when it came, was not through a grand gesture or a careless mistake. It was quiet and utterly devastating. Robert, ever the pragmatist, decided to back up all our family computer files onto an external hard drive before we left for college. He was methodical, transferring years of digital memories, vacations, school plays, birthdays. He also transferred a hidden folder Alara had forgotten was there. A folder labeled Art Ref that was, in fact, a digital diary of us. It contained no explicit photos, nothing salacious. It contained something far more intimate. Hundreds of pictures I had taken of her. Alara sleeping on the grass in the park, her face peaceful. Alara laughing, her head thrown back, a sight reserved only for me. Alara looking at the camera, at me, with a love so raw and unguarded it was a physical force. And there were writings. Her poems, fragments of stories that were so clearly about us, about our hidden clearing, about the feel of my hand in hers. He found it on a Tuesday evening. The four of us were supposed to go out for dinner to celebrate our college acceptations. We'd both gotten into state, with plans to transfer to UCLA together after a year, thanks to her scholarship wins. The atmosphere at the dinner table was icy before the food even arrived. Robert wouldn't look at either of us. My mother was nervously chattering, sensing the storm but not knowing its source. It was in the car on the way home that it broke. Alara, Robert said, his voice dangerously calm, cutting through my mother's small talk. We need to talk about the files on the computer. I saw Alara's face drain of all color in the rearview mirror. My own heart stopped. The confrontation that followed in our pristine living room was a quiet, brutal thing. There was no yelling. Robert's disappointment was a cold, suffocating blanket. His words were measured, laced with the pain we had caused. How long? He asked, his voice tight. Was this some kind of rebellion? In my own house? Your sister's. That last one was the knife twist. My mother was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. She looked lost, betrayed, confused. I don't understand, she kept whispering. Maya, is this true with Alara? How could you? She's your sister. She's not my sister! The words exploded from me, a raw scream of frustration and pain that had been building for 4 years. She's the girl I fell in love with. You two got married. That doesn't make us sisters. It just made us live in the same house. The silence that followed was absolute. The truth was out, ugly and shocking and real. The verdict was delivered with a quiet finality. We were to stop. Immediately. It was a phase, a confusion born of shared trauma and proximity. We were forbidden from being alone together. Our plans for college were canceled. We would attend the local community college, live at home, and get our heads on straight. Our world, so carefully built in secret, had been split open and dismantled in a single night. The long road to a new shore. The following months were a special kind of hell. We were ghosts in the same house, passing each other in the hallways with downcast eyes, monitored and policed. We became experts in clandestine communication. A dropped note in the laundry basket, a quick sign language gesture stolen from a YouTube video, a book left on a windowsill signaling a time to look out and see each other, just for a moment from across the yard. Our love didn't die. It went underground, becoming a hardened, resilient thing, forged in the fire of opposition. It was no longer just about passion. It was about defiance. It was about survival. Our escape was slow and meticulously planned. We worked part-time jobs, saving every penny. We applied to universities across the country as transfer students, using a friend's address for correspondence. We chose Seattle, It was far, it was rainy, and it felt like a place that could hold us. Leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done. The look on my mother's face as I packed my bags was a physical pain. She saw it not as me pursuing my future, but as me choosing sin over family. Robert stood stoically behind her, his arm around her, his face a mask of grim disappointment. He believed he was saving his daughter from a mistake. We didn't say goodbye to them. We left letters explaining our love, not as a rebellion, but as our truth. We begged for their understanding, even if we couldn't wait for their acceptance. The bus ride to Seattle was 36 hours long. We held hands the entire way, watching the landscape change, our future an uncertain, terrifying, glorious blank page ahead of us. Life on our own was hard. A cramped apartment, ramen noodles for dinner, the constant anxiety of making ends meet. But it was ours. We could hold hands walking down the street. We could introduce each other as girlfriends. We could kiss in our own kitchen. The simple, everyday acts of love that had been forbidden to us were now our greatest luxuries. The rift with our parents took years to slowly, painfully mend. It started with awkward, stilted phone calls on birthdays, then short emails. My mother was the first to break, flying out to visit us after 2 years. She saw our apartment, small but filled with light and books and the art Alara created. She saw how we cared for each other, how we built a life not on rebellion, but on respect and deep, abiding love. She saw that we were happy, truly, fundamentally happy. It was the one thing she couldn't argue with. Robert took longer. His acceptance was a slow thaw, a gradual realization that losing his daughter was a far greater pain than accepting her truth. The first time he called our apartment and asked to speak to both of us, we cried for an hour after hanging up. Part 7. Before the Law. 10 years after that first touch in the dark, we stood on a cliff overlooking the Puget Sound, the water a shimmering tapestry of silver and blue below us. The air was crisp, smelling of salt and pine. Alara got down on one knee. "Maya," she said, her stormy eyes, now filled with a certainty I adored, looking up at me. "You were the color that came back into my world. You are my home. Will you marry me?" I said yes, laughing through tears that felt like a final release of all the old fear. We wanted a small wedding, just a few friends. But we also wanted it to be legal, recognized. A fact in the eyes of the world and the law. Marriage equality was the law of the land, but it still felt like a revolutionary act to us. We flew back to our hometown to get the marriage license. It felt like closing a circle. The courthouse was the same one where our parents had gotten their license over a decade before. The clerk was a kind-faced woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose. She took our forms, her fingers tapping on the keyboard. Names? Maya Evans. Alara Miller. She typed. She asked for our IDs, our birth dates. The routine was mundane, administrative, but to us, every click of the keyboard was a symphony. She looked up at us, a small, knowing smile on her face. "Everything seems to be in order." She stamped the form with a definitive thud. "Congratulations, you're all set." She handed us the official document. I looked down at it. Our names, side by side. Party A and Party B. The language was cold, legal, but it was the most beautiful poetry I had ever read. It was a piece of paper, but it was so much more. It was a validation. It was a shield. It was the world, at long last, saying, "We see you. You exist. Your love counts." We walked out of the courthouse, hand in hand, into the sunlight. We didn't need to hide the tears streaming down our faces. We were no longer a secret. We were a fact. We were wives. That night, in our old hometown, we stayed in a hotel room. We ordered room service and put on a movie. It wasn't a forbidden lesbian romance. It was a silly comedy. We lay in bed, tangled together, laughing freely. We were no longer two girls hiding in the dark, hoping for a way to be close. We were two women, recognized by the law, cherished by a slowly healing family, and bound by a love that had weathered its first storm and built a new shore. Our story had begun with a secret touch, and now it was written into the public record. And it was just beginning. Epilogue. The color of our sky. Our wedding was held in our clearing by the creek, the one in the park that had been our first sanctuary. The leaves were just beginning to turn, painting the world in gold and crimson. It was a small gathering, a few close friends from Seattle. My mother, her eyes still holding a trace of old sadness but shining with a new, hard-won joy for me. Robert stood beside Alara, his hand on her shoulder, giving her away not as a possession, but as a blessing. He even smiled when he saw me. We wrote our own vows. Alara's were poetic, about storms and calm seas and being each other's anchor. Mine were simpler. I talked about gray houses and the girl who taught me how to see color again. As the officiant pronounced us legally married, a shaft of autumn sunlight broke through the canopy of trees, illuminating us both. We kissed, not as secret lovers, but as wives, surrounded by the people who loved us. The sky above us was no longer a secret. It was wide and open and brilliantly, beautifully blue. It was ours. And it was finally, completely, full of light.